So we're going to see if we can nest more than just 2 for loops. Let's see if we can nest 3 for loops. If 2 nested for loops brings to my mind the idea of an Excel spreadsheet, then 3 nested for loops might bring to my mind the idea of a Rubik's Cube. Because not only does it have a height and a width, but it also has depth. But I don't know how to draw a Rubik's Cube in a 2-dimensional output window. So instead what we're going to use is something that might have 3 components that are moving independently, and that would be a clock. I'm pretty sure that a clock has an hour hand, a minute hand, and a second hand. And so we're going to see if we can replicate the movement of a clock using a 3 nested for loop. So let me write a little bit of pseudocode about what we're planning on doing. So we're going to say that we're going to use 3 nested for loops to simulate a clock. The first loop is going to control the hours. The second loop is going to control minutes. And the third loop will control the seconds. Just to be as explicit as possible, I'm going to call my loop control variables hours, minutes, and seconds. So what do I want to do when I finally get inside of the final loop? I would like to display the time on the clock and have it moving through. So let me put a little bit of a print statement of what I would like that clock display to look like. So I want it to display my clock as hour, minute, second, and I want it to move through the 3 loops. So let's build my first outer for loop. So my first for loop is going to control the hour. I'll call my loop control variable hour. I'm going to increment it from 1 to 12. The second for loop is going to control the minutes. The minutes are going to move from 1 to 59. And then my third for loop, the innermost for loop, is going to control the seconds. So now I have my third inner for loop, and all I wanted to do inside of here was to display the clock. Because the seconds and the minutes are running from 1 to 59, which is what seconds and minutes do, and my hour is running from 1 to 12, all I want to do is display my clock. Since I already have my print statement built, I'm just going to copy it into a printf, and we're going to see what we can get it to do. So my printf, or print format, requires not only a text field, but it requires some variables. This is what I am trying to display. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it into the text field, since that is what I wanted to display. But I'm pretty sure that the 9 is actually supposed to be hours. And so I'm going to replace that with an integer variable. So I'm going to put a %d. Pretty sure that the 15 is supposed to be the minutes. So I want to replace that with a variable, and the variable is an integer. So I'm going to put a %d. The last one is also an integer variable. So I'm going to replace 3 variables. So I'm going to come outside of the text field and comma separate. The first variable that I was trying to replace was hour. The second variable I was trying to replace was minute, and the last one was second. Now we know that the printf does not force a new line, and every time it prints my clock, I would like to force a new line. So I'm going to put a new line character inside of that next field, so that every time it runs it, it will force a new line. So let's compile it and run it and see what happens. So I can actually see the program running. I can see that it's moving through the seconds, and when the second reaches 59, that it increments the minute. And when the minute finally reaches 59, that it increments the hour. Let's see if we can actually watch it do it, or see this doing that. All right, so I have a minute of 56 or 55. When my second hit 59 and it rolled back to 1, it incremented my minute. And I can see as I watch my second increment all the way down to 59 again, there it is. Once my second has incremented to 59, it drops out of that second loop. It increments my minute loop, and it drops back into my second loop, and it continues through the seconds until the second reaches 59 again. It drops out of the second loop, increments the minute loop, drops back into the second loop. So this is an example of a nested for loop using 3 for loops. We could have replicated a Rubik's Cube. We could have replicated a clock, which we did. Another example of something that might use a nested for loop with 3 fors would be, say, for instance, a college campus. There can be 7 buildings on a college campus. Each one of the individual buildings could have 3 floors, and each one of the individual floors could have 7 classrooms. That might be an example of using a nested for loop to move through each one of the classrooms on each of the floors in each one of the buildings.